What's up, guys? I want to do a bit of a companion piece to yesterday's video. Tigers had a really awesome comment on my modern anime is garbage video. His comment also stood out to me because I was in high school when Haruhi came out, and that's when I really got into my otakuisms. And Haruhi was, I don't know, was a big part of that. He had a lot of interesting points. I didn't want it to just be lost to the ether, so let's talk about it. Unpopular opinion. Haruhi was the right show at the exact right time to set the trend for these problems. Anime has always had cliches of being very anime in nature. There's no arguing away from that. And you see a lot of it even today from the stuff we loved back then. But Haruhi came at a time when Japan's economy was really about to falter in terms of their purchasing power and all other sorts of monetary related issues. Yeah, absolutely true. What Haruhi in specific did was establish a sudden obsession on the part of show writers with making half of the anime industry about Japanese school kids. A lot of the general trends in this show, I really think, are the genesis of modern isekai and action fantasy stories that really dominate the industry right now. Perhaps you're right on that. I don't even think that's an unpopular opinion. I think that's just a opinion that isn't always articulated because you would have had to of being aware of anime in the late 90s and the early 2000s to even comprehend the impact that Haruhi had in the mid 2000s. And then you also have to be aware of anime today. There aren't that many people in the anime industry or even like AniTube who are commenting on the state of anime now compared to then. So yeah, I understand why this would seem like an unpopular opinion, but Tigers, I agree with you because Haruhi changed the trend for a lot of things. When Haruhi was introduced, all of the sudden there was like a franchising ability with anime. Not that that didn't exist before. Obviously, Pokemon and Digimon were some of the biggest series of the late 90s into the 2000s. Yu-Gi-Oh was obviously big, and these were very calculated series that came from like Weekly Shonen Jump or popular light novels, whatever. But Haruhi was different in the sense that it showed you what you could do with a very thought provoking show. There aren't that many animes, especially during that time, that had a focus on the conversation between characters. There always had to be something going on. There always had to be a goal. There had to be a journey. And Haruhi does have typical anime tropes, but you can tell it's the show writers, like you mentioned, coming together to figure out how can we, with our limited budget and limited source material, put together a very intriguing show that has the possibility to be very popular, not just with otaku, but also with a global audience. It is around that time when you saw anime starting to go in that direction. I think harem also contributed to that. All of a sudden, characters were falling under certain trends and hits that you had to have for your character design. That's why you see a particular mid 2000s art style, which doesn't really look good. Clanad, Air, Azumanga anime adaptation, Cromartie anime adaptation. It has that kind of weird look where it's supposed to look very cartoony. It's not as Japanese as you would expect, but just anime enough for it to get by. That works when you're Avatar because this show is influenced by but not trying to be an anime. But when you have animes that are trying to be very glossy and colorful and trying to create a cast that can be engaged on a monetary value, it does strip away a lot of the integrity of a series. Haruhi, on the other hand, understood that, and they were able to take all those financial aspirations and combined it with a really strong story that was not only meta in nature, but was able to be appreciated by anybody who enjoys thought-provoking media. You can really have your anime stand out regardless of the art style if the story is strong. Obviously, finding good writers and a good staff that can put together not only a popular series, but a successful series, which is hard to do, that's always a challenge, and I feel like Haruhi did do that, and it set the tone for what a lot of studios try to do with their animes over the next 15 years. Number 2. The sudden, somewhat global demand of Japanese animation, given its relative perceived freedom in subject matter, combined with Japan's economic problems, created these greater pressures to producing as much content as possible on increasingly short budgets and production time. The Japanese high school setting sort of produced a greater opportunity for more dialogue heavy shows. Yeah, exactly. Even in great shows past and present, anime has always kind of had this problem where too much exposition gets in the way of interesting visual storytelling. So I'm honestly not sure if that's a cultural thing or has always been a budgetary thing. But I'm convinced the economic problems have caused even great pressures because every time I put on a new anime someone tells me is the absolute best, I'm treated to a few minutes of decent animation and then characters sit around a table and gab for another 15 minutes. It gets very tiresome. And on top of the padding problem, the production schedules are so tight. And it's not even just anime. Video games have this problem right now too. This is also creating a new pressure to just pump out stuff, and I think stories and characters are suffering for it as well. I think that's correct, but maybe there is some justification behind that. There's more media to be consumed today than when Haruhi came out because there's more ways for us to watch media. Data plans are so much better all over the world than they were at different points in time in history. Like, I live in Canada and our data plans aren't that great. As recently as like 5, 6 years ago, you were locked into 3 year plans. The 3 year plans for data would be like maybe 10 gigabytes of data, maybe 20 if you're on a corporate plan, but you would be paying well over $100, sometimes 150 for a monthly plan. So if you were on rolled a lot, or if you were working and you want to watch a video, you would burn through your data quickly, and the overage charges were fucking crazy. So for someone like me, who I was always working and I would be watching anime in between class or shifts, and I wouldn't be at home often, those were things I had to consider with my mobile device. Nowadays, data plans are fucking awesome. Even in Canada, where our plans still don't really compare to the rest of the world, devices are better. They're cheaper as well. There's much more available. So when you have the tools to consume a product, you're going to see industries change as well. There's so many more shows that are being greenlit today. We don't really have that many 7, 8, 9 season long shows anymore. But even though we do get, 2, 3, 4 season long shows, anime and IRL, TV, sitcoms, whatever, it's good. The amount of movies we get as well, there's always an opportunity for us to watch. And because there's a database for streaming, you don't have to like sit down and watch everything before it gets taken off of YouTube. When I was watching Haruhi, we were watching it on YouTube in part 1, 2, and 3 per episode. So there was a bit of, we need to consume Haruhi now. We need to consume Pumpkin Scissors or My Hime or Code Geass or whatever the most popular animes were, because there just wasn't the infrastructure available to provide us with the opportunity to watch these animes. And I think studios definitely picked up on this, which is why they started pumping out more anime. Even if not all of your series that you produced this year would be making it overseas, if you had 1 or 2 really big hits, that could give you another 2 years of money to keep on pushing this studio. And then there were so many offshoots of studios as well. There were studios that were fully embracing 3D, or they were solely producing anime movies, and there were still those studios that wanted to do the traditional take of anime with maybe very little CG involved. And then all of a sudden you started seeing more thought-provoking anime. Like you said, there was a lot more conversation. Gag manga all of a sudden became very popular, and gag manga anime adaptations were also a pretty big hit from between like 2005 to 2015. That's the Gintama Beelzebub effect. I think you definitely have some merit to what you're saying. Another case in point, Demon Slayer. I fucking love Demon Slayer. I think it's a really great series, but I think the manga art isn't exceptional, and I think it's carried in the anime. It's like what you said. A lot of people who watch Demon Slayer today, they always talk about season 1 episode 19, or they always talk about the movie, or they're talking about all of the action scenes, basically the scenes that the studio are working on for like half a year for just that particular 7 minute segment. It's well choreographed because that is what's going to win awards. That's what's going to get traction for the season. With anime fans, it used to be discussed the monologues of villains and the awesome comeback of characters. Piccolo would get his ass kicked all of the time, but he had some cold as fuck lines. It just made things so much more interesting because anime wasn't just about the fights, it was also about the tension and the atmosphere. And even though Haruhi brought it back into the classroom, it had that tension, it had that atmosphere. It created an environment where you were really engaged in the dialogue. So yeah, you would get your ecchi moments in between, you would get your action scenes in between, but it was well written. Anime today kind of lost that plot. Now, like you said, it is like Demon Slayer. They're just focused on those big episodes episodes, those big moments, but they're not focused on trying to create an interesting plot when characters are talking. All they really need to do is act zany and just push along the plot until we get to the last 5 minutes of the episode when we can have all of the action. For me, that creates a strong disconnect between what I loved growing up in the early to mid 2000s and what's coming out now. And yeah, totally, it happens with video games too. I'm tired of paying $80 to $100 for a game that is incomplete. I would rather wait 6 months for you to finally finish it instead of forcing me to have a broken experience right away and then having to pay for DLC later on. I understand this is the meta now for gaming. I'm not really into it. I think the trend towards the 12 episode season is concerning too. In the past, you could expect that 12 episodes to be crammed with interesting stories. One of my favorite shows, FLCL, is only 6 episodes. I gave up watching a lot of this because it seemed like, even with premises I liked, the show writers sort of just dropped the ball. I don't even necessarily think it's the fault of animation studios and writers. They're doing the best they can with what they have. In fact, I think this problem has at least incentivized a lot of shows to produce more beautiful still art shots with thoughtful coloring and line work, which is certainly a commendable attempt to bolster the trade-off, but it doesn't eliminate the overall problem. I don't read much manga, but I have this feeling that scene is where you're seeing the best work right now. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, or back me up on that if they're reading manga. Tigers, thank you so much for that entire thing. I really did appreciate reading that and thinking about it over the last couple weeks. So I'll answer backwards to the top for that part. In manga right now, yeah, there is a lot of great manga. There's so much good manga. Even like your typical manga, your very commercial stuff. It's just so well done. Quite frankly, I think we're in a great place. I think a lot of animes coming up will also be good. Unfortunately, I just think the most popular anime are the ones that just have no real integrity to them. They're not that interesting, or even if, like you said, if they are interesting, the premise just disappears. There is a good amount of manga like that. Like, I keep on talking about it, but Gachi Yakuda, I find Gachi Yakuda to be a phenomenon to me because I'm seeing in real time style over substance. I'm seeing a great art style with a premise that started off very strong that has yet to live up to the hype. And when people were recommending Gachi Yakuda and I read it, to me, I had the exact same emotions as you. Yes, it's a manga, but this manga seems like it's trying to be that anime. The anime that you're talking about, the one where it's just all about the visuals, the story doesn't really do much, you have random conversations and stupid jokes and quips between characters because that's what people like to see, case in point the MCU. And then you have that wicked battle. And the battle is the thing you're going to remember. So if the show writers and if the animators know that all you really need to focus on is the big battle, and if the mangaka also knows, or the light novel author knows that really they just care about the big conflict or the meetup, you don't really have to spend so much time on developing the cast. You don't have to spend so much time on having conversations that are going to resonate with the reader or the viewer. And yeah, there is manga that is doing that, and it's doing it at a high level, and you're going to see 2023 and 2024 a lot of great adaptations from mainstream magazines. But until then, there's so much shit that we have to dig through. The 12 episode season I'm kind of okay with if it justifies it. I think 12 episodes is enough for an anime, 12, 13, to be able to tell a good original story. If it's an adaptation, that's a little harder. I know people say there's the whole one core, two core thing. That wasn't always the case. Distinctive separation between seasons, that did start coming towards the late 2000s. But when we had 26 episode seasons, you didn't see that part A, part B thing. It was more so, we'll tell a story and have cool down episodes, and we'll have a beach episode. And yes, there will be filler, but we're going to use this downtime to make the characters really interesting and build the world and the lore a little bit. Dragon Ball Z definitely had a lot of problems with its filler, but the filler in battle was what was complained about the most, where a lot of the scenes were being reused. The filler episodes, like when they were training and they would take a break, some of those episodes were really fun. Goku and Piccolo getting their driver's license, that was just such a great example of filler. But I think studios are afraid of even attempting to do filler like that nowadays because of Naruto. Naruto's filler was not good. One Piece filler is barely good. Bleach filler killed the show. So I understand why there are so many studios that want to avoid filler. I just think it would be a great opportunity for studios to actually like sit down and realize that, hey, we can build up a lot of our characters. All we really need to do is understand that it's not just about the battles. We want to have those moments where like the One Piece is real. When that's going to be animated, I know a lot of fans are going to be talking about the same thing that I'm mentioning now. They want to have those high moments where it's just a communication between characters. Honestly, you can only really get that when you have longer seasons that aren't separated. And I don't know. I don't really know if we're going to get that. But what can I say? Anime is in a good place right now, and while there is a lot of shows that I don't really like, and there are manga that I think perpetuate the problems of the modern manga industry that I think is kind of hurting the art form, I'm so grateful for what we have. And like I said, there are a lot of awesome animes coming out. Thank you, Tigers, again. I'm probably going to do a Haruhi rewatch over the holiday season because you reminded me of how much I love that series and how much it impacted anime. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for watching. Take it easy.